chapter 7, section 8 is on negative rational exponents. So we're going to take everything we did yesterday, which built upon the day before, and add one more step, which is a negative. Okay, so these are the exact same steps, only now we're adding a negative. So again, to kind of break this down, we're going to do x to the 1 over n, and then we're going to do that to the negative m. Okay, so same idea, breaking it apart, and now we're just adding the negative. And if you remember what a negative exponent does, this guy right here, the negative exponent, takes the reciprocal. Okay, so that's going way back to the beginning of this chapter. It does not make it negative, it takes the reciprocal, so be careful there. Okay, so if I have 8 to the negative 2/3, again, like yesterday, I'm going to break that to 8 to the 1/3, only that's going to make it the negative 2. Okay, so 8 to the 1/3 is 2 to the negative 2. Well, 2 squared is 4, so 2 to the negative 2 is 1 over 4. Okay, so the negative takes the reciprocal, so just be really careful there, okay? All right, so b has 1 over 100 to the negative 3 over 2. Now in this case, because I'm starting with a fraction, it might be easier to actually take the reciprocal first. So in this case, I'm going to make that 100 to the positive 3 over 2. So I can take the reciprocal, which gets rid of that negative. Okay, and now I can break it up into 100 to the 1/2 and then to the third. So this looks just like yesterday now. 100 to the 1/2 is 10. 10 to the third is 1,000. Okay, there is kind of a nice way to check it. If you have a negative exponent, in example A, I started with a whole number and my answer was a fraction. Okay, in example B, I started with a fraction and I ended with a whole number. So if I have a negative, it should change what I started with. Okay, if it didn't, then you missed something. Okay, so that's kind of a nice way to check yourself. All right, example C, I still start with a fraction. So again, I'm going to get rid of the negative first. So I'm going to take the reciprocal and make that 27 over 64 then to the positive 2/3. Okay, so switch this and then get rid of the negative. Okay, that's kind of a nice way to do it if you've got a fraction. So now, like yesterday, I'm going to take 27 over 64 to the 1/3 and then take that and square it. Okay, just keep in mind that you need to distribute the 1/3 to the top and the bottom. 27 to the 1/3 is 3. 64 to the 1/3 is 4. And I still have all of that to be squared. Okay, so watch it. Again, it goes to the top and the bottom. 3 squared is 9. 4 squared is 16. So my final answer is 9 over 16. Okay, well, you can't really use your trick in C because I had a fraction, I ended with a fraction, but I did flip it. Okay, so that's it still works. It's just a little harder to see in that one. Okay, example D is x to the negative 4/5 y to the third. So I have to get rid of the negative. Okay, so this part needs to go to the bottom as x to the positive 4/5 and y to the third stays positive, so that just goes on the top. Okay, so there's a little of that stuff we did in the beginning of the chapter and then just reminding us on how to work with that. Okay, so if we start simplifying, m to the second, n to the fourth, all to the negative 3/2. Again, I would distribute first here. So m to the 2 to the 3 over 2 means I need to multiply 2 times 3/2. So that's going to give me m to the negative 3. Again, if I multiply with my n, 4 times negative 3 over 2. Okay, again, if you're having a hard time with this, this is 4 over 1 times 3 over 2. Multiply straight across, that's going to give me 12 over 2, which is going to give me 6. Okay, if you're someone who needs to write that out, that's fine. Just remember, you're not going to get a calculator, and if you're not good with fractions, it's better to write it out than to get it wrong. Okay, so again, just put that and then multiply straight across. So now I've got m to the negative 3, n to the negative 6. Okay, they're both negative, which means they both need to go to the bottom. So 1 over m to the third, n to the 6th. Okay. So if I've got example F, I've got negative 15 x to the 7th, y to the negative 2/3 over 5 x to the negative 10th, y to the 1/3. So there's a lot going on. Okay, just like in the beginning of the chapter, I want you to remember that there's 6 things here. Okay, there's a set of numbers, there's a set of x's, and there's a set of y's. Okay, so let's do our numbers first. Negative 15 divided by 5, those are just numbers. So negative 15 divided by 5 is negative 3. Okay, so that's done. Now I've got my x's. When you are dividing, you subtract. So I got 7 minus negative 10. Write it out if you have to, because that becomes positive 17. Because it's positive, x to the 17th is going to go on the top. Now I've got my y's. I've got negative 2/3 minus 1/3. Well, that's going to give me negative 3/3, which is really negative 1 because it's negative. It's going to go on the bottom as y, or y to the first if you want. Okay, so watch your negatives, get used to working with fractions, just take it nice and slow, and hopefully you'll be all right. Okay, then we're going to get into some solving ones. So same idea as yesterday, you just have an extra step. So to get rid of a negative 4/6, I need to raise it to the negative 6/4 on both sides. So on the left side, I just get x now. Now I have 1/256 to the negative 6/4. I'm going to make that 256 to the positive 6/4. Okay, so I took the reciprocal and I got rid of the negative right away. Okay, that's going to make that 256 to the 1/4 and then to the 6th. Well, what to the 4th is 256? That's 4. And then 4 to the 6th is not on your sheet, so I would just leave that as 4 to the 6th. Okay, there's a lot of steps here. It's not that bad if you just go one by one. Okay, example H, I'd have to divide by 5 first. So then I have w to the negative 5 equals negative 243. Okay, again, maybe that's a little too mean without a calculator, so I wouldn't do that too on a test. To get rid of a negative 1/5, I have to raise it to the negative 1/5. And when I do that on the right side, I have to make sure that my negative 243 goes in parentheses and then raises that to a negative 1/5. So on my left side, my exponents cancel. Now I'll be really careful here. This negative on the 243 and this negative on the 1/5, these two are completely different things. This negative on the 243 makes that number negative. This negative on the exponent takes the reciprocal. Okay, so these negatives are completely different. They do not cancel. Okay, make sure you know the difference. So I'm going to do negative 243 to the 1/5 and then do the negative 1 at the end. So I'm going to say what to the 5th power is negative 243? Well, that is a negative 3. And I have that to the negative 1 power, which makes that negative 1/3. Okay, so again, I split up negative 1/5 into the 1/5 and the negative 1. The 1/5 gave me the negative 3. I still had a negative 1 to be my exponent, so that took the reciprocal to be a negative 1/3. Okay, so just be really careful what those negatives mean. So if we take a look at example I would start by subtracting 11. So 3x to the negative 3/2 would equal 81. Then I'd have to divide by 3. So I get x to the negative 3/2 to be 27. Then I need to get rid of the negative 3/2 by doing to the negative 2/3 on each side. So I'm going to get x equal 27 to the 1/3 and then to the negative 2. 27 to the 1/3 is 3, to the negative 2 is 1/9. Okay, 3 to the positive 2 is 9, and then flip it. Okay, so 1/9 is my final answer. Lots of steps there, just take them nice and slow. Okay, letter J, I'm going to add 14 first. So I'm going to get 1/4 w to the negative 4/5 equals 64. Divide by 1/4. Careful here. When I divide by 1/4, I get w to the negative 4/5 to equal a 256, because that's really like multiplying by 4. Okay. And then raise it to the reciprocal. So raise each side to the negative 5/4. So the left side cancels. So I get w equals 256 to the 1/4. And then to the negative 5. So what to the 4th is 256? Well, that's 4 to the negative 5. Okay, so I'm not sure what 4 to the 5th is, but I know I need to flip it. So you get 1/4 to the 5th. That's not on my sheet, so I would just leave it as 1/4 to the 5th. Okay, so big idea today, taking a negative reciprocal, okay, so doing something like this really just makes it the reciprocal. That's your big idea here today. Okay, that is not the same as a negative 15. Okay, that's just negative 15. Okay, so make sure you've got those ideas separate. Write down some questions. I'm sure you have some. Okay, and bring those to class tomorrow.